So Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump have met once again in another historic meeting, this time at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Here are some of the pictures that came out, and there's been a lot of important takeaways from this meeting that I want to unpack with you. And, this relationship between these two men has been world-changing in nature. And many people have been saying there's some fractures going on. There's people on the right as well as from the left, but the right obviously could potentially impact Trump more because that's his base, and they've been pushing for, America moving away from Israel, not picking up much of that here in this meeting. Now, let's be clear, there may be some ways in which Trump and Netanyahu may not completely align, and there may be things that Trump wants that I, as a Jew and someone that cares deeply about the future of Israel, might not agree with some of Trump's suggestions. But overall, it seems pretty clear to me from this meeting that they are very Trump as well as Bibi, of course. They are sincere in their devotion towards doing whatever it takes to protect Israel. And Trump really had some very strong words of support for Netanyahu here. Have a listen to what he said here.
Can you guarantee that?
To me, he's been very good.
Can you guarantee that?
Sure.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu and how important it is for you to see him be pardoned by the Israeli president?
Look, he's a wartime prime minister. He's done a phenomenal job. He's taken Israel through a very dangerous period of trauma. Israel with other people might not exist right now, if you want to know the truth. That's a pretty big statement, but it's true. I feel that. You had the wrong prime minister, Israel right now would not exist because they were met with a force the likes of which very few countries could have handled, and we worked together and we were extremely victorious, to put it mildly.
Now, I've got to be honest, I think Trump may well be right here. Think about the other candidates that are actually viable as possible political candidates to be prime minister. It is Netanyahu who often made the tougher calls, the more unpopular calls, when others may have called for different policies on Iran and Hamas and caving more to the Biden administration. Netanyahu held firm, and he's prepared to go out there and say, we're going to do it, we're going to go after Iran, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, even in the face of huge unpopularity. Don't get me wrong, there are things that I would want to see that would be different. I, in some ways, call for even tougher action with regard to Hamas in Gaza and the way the war was fought, and etc., and Iran, this idea that we stopped after 12 days when we could have destroyed their ballistic missiles, which they're now talking about rebuilding, although Trump has said, in fairness to him, that if Israel wants to go after Iran again, if they continue to rebuild, he'll definitely support that. And I'm sure Netanyahu was worried about caving to Trump and all that stuff. He's clearly trying to manage a very tricky situation. And there's no doubt that he is a remarkable leader. And Trump sees that. And this partnership, at its best, can be a really strong partnership for Israel, for the Middle East, for the world. And I'll show you another clip precisely where he says just that about Iran. Have a watch.
An attack, Israeli attack on Iran, if Iran will not have a deal. If Iran will continue with their ballistic missiles and also nuclear weapons.
If they will continue with the missiles, yes. The nuclear, fast.
Well, there you go. Not beating around the bush. Other presidents in the past would use very diplomatic language. Trump, as a businessman, does not do any of that at all. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting, which is that Trump said here, about the idea of remigration for the people of Gaza. This is something that I have supported and called for, and Trump originally called for and supported, but since the peace plan came into effect, there's all this talk about rebuilding Gaza, etc. Have a watch of what he says here when he's asked about this, because this for me was in some ways one of the most significant parts.
A recent poll showed that as many as half of Gazans would be willing to leave the Gaza Strip if afforded the opportunity to do so. Back in February, you said that all Gazans should be resettled.
I heard that number today, half of Gaza would leave. I've always said it.
I said, if they were given the opportunity to live in a better climate, they would move. They're there because they sort of have to be. I think it would be a great opportunity, but let's see if that opportunity presents itself. But we're helping the people of Gaza a lot. So is Israel, by the way. So we'll see what happens. But I saw that it was a poll. It was actually more than half the people would leave if they were given the opportunity. And I've been saying that for a long time. To me, it was common sense. So it's interesting.
Yeah. First of all, you should know that America, I believe, asked Israel to pay for the some of the reconstruction efforts in Gaza, which I think is utterly insane and morally perverse. You wage a war against us, and now we have to rebuild your towns and buildings. I mean, that is completely absurd in my mind, morally absurd. But the notion of remigration is completely, I think, morally sound and beneficial to all parties. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that Trump is still open to that. Why do I say that? Because Israel has tried for 100 years to make peace with the Arabs in the area who claim that they just simply want to be able to have statehood and self-determination. But it turns out that actually, as we've seen from every single attempt at peace by Israel, as we've seen from this long and painful history, that they're not actually interested in self-determination. That when they tried to wipe out Israel in 48 and 67, there wouldn't have been a Palestinian state. All the Arabs would have had a chunk of the land. And we know that because when Egypt and Jordan took control of Judea and Samaria and Gaza between 48 to 67, they didn't establish a Palestinian state there. The idea of Palestinian as a state didn't even make sense to them. They just thought of them as Arabs. No, the Palestinian state national concept was created as a cynical ploy to pull on the heartstrings of the West in order to destroy Israel. And Israel tested that theory also in 2005 by saying to the Arabs in Gaza, okay, go on, go ahead, make a mini state of your own in Gaza. Let's see what happens. And what did they choose? Jew hatred, terrorism, as evidenced by the Hamas terrorists that went into Israel on October 7th. And these young Gazans called their parents saying, Allahu Akbar, I've killed Jews. I'm a martyr. Showing that this is about religious ideological hatred. It's not about genuine legitimate grievance and desire for statehood and self-determination. And it's about an Islamist worldview that seeks to have the Jews as second-class citizens, not as restoring their state, because it threatens their whole theology. You know, Israel and the Jews are meant to be the wandering Jew, the Jew that is downtrodden, that is second class because they're no longer God's chosen people. Sorry to get very deep with you, but that is what's really going on here. So, given that fact, wouldn't it make sense to say, okay, look, you keep choosing war. And in the positive sense, if anyone has a right to this land, it's the Jewish people. Biblically, historically, legally, morally, and certainly from a spiritual, divine perspective. So, what do you do with the people living there? They've shown they're not actually interested in statehood. They've shown that that's what's really going on. And I think that for as long as you have Arabs living here as a autonomous zone, their leaders and the people will inevitably keep choosing and going for an ideology that seeks to destroy Israel. Why? Because it runs so deep within their traditions and their texts, unfortunately. So, if I was a Gazan, aren't I much more likely to have a chance of a better, more peaceful life if I lived in another part of the Arab world to which I'm actually indigenous to? I think Trump is right. His instincts, his business instincts are right there and saying, hold on one second, we keep trying the same old tired tunes and what happens? Maybe if we relocate them to an Arab world and landmass which is 100 times the size of Israel. 57 Muslim countries out there, one tiny sliver of land for a Jewish country. And also, in the positive sense, for the Jewish people, the land of Gaza, which they have sweat, bled, and died over. and which the God of Israel thousands of years ago promised to them, I think asserting Jewish sovereignty there would be the right move too. And by the way, this has never been to say that non-Jews shouldn't be able to live in any part of Israel, but we have to maintain the Jewish character of this land, meaning the values that govern the territory. If non-Jews are happy to synergize with those values and work with those values, great, fine. No issue at all. That's how any country should operate, by the way. We have values. If you want to be part of our country and buy into those values, great. If not, well, then we've got a problem. But either way, this plan makes sense. Trying the same old two-state solution idea is utter insanity, because we've tried it for 100 years. Now, let's have a look at what Trump said when he was asked about the issue of Hamas and disarmament.
If you don't see Hamas disarm in that short amount of time that you're giving them, can you tell us what the next steps would be?
It'll be horrible for them. Horrible. It's going to be really, really bad for them. And I don't want that to happen. But they made an agreement that they were going to disarm. You know, we have many countries, 59 countries that are in agreement. This is a real peace in the Middle East. And Hamas is a small part of it, but it's still a part of it. But we have 59 countries that signed on, big countries, countries that are outside of the Middle East, as you know the Middle East. They want to go in and wipe out Hamas. They don't want Israel. They don't need Israel. They want to do it because it's the right thing to do, because they were for the deal based on the fact that Hamas pledged, they swore that they were going to disarm. Now, if they're not going to disarm, those same countries will wipe out Hamas.
Wow. So that is really significant stuff to hear that he's saying actually it's the other Arab countries that will be involved. I wonder who he's referring to. Saudi Arabia? Now, what does he say about this idea of, how he feels about what Israel's doing?
President, are you concerned that Israel is not moving quickly enough to phase 2 of the peace plan?
Well, I'm not concerned about anything that Israel's doing. I'm concerned about what other people are doing or maybe aren't doing. But I'm not concerned. They've lived up to the plan. They're strong. They're solid. And sometimes they don't understand when somebody violates something that you want to give them a second chance. Well, we'll give them a couple of second chances. But no, Israel's lived up to the plan 100%.
Now, by the way, I have strong concerns with the plan. We did a great interview with Natasha Hausdorff last week. This idea of potentially having Qatari, Turkish troops involved in Gaza would be utterly insane. But the point is, Trump doesn't have any issue with Israel right now. This idea you're getting from some reports and journalists that there's daylight between Trump and Israel is just completely demonstrably false. And by the way, one thing I think about, again, going back to this idea of relocating the people of Gaza, Gaza in 2005, when Israel disengaged, that was treated as a litmus test, a prototype for the two-state solution to see what would happen. And we got our answer. So my suggestion would be, why don't we do the exact same thing about a relocation, remigration plan for the Palestinians in Gaza, the Arabs in Gaza? Why don't we try that? And then if that works, maybe we could look at that for potentially even on a voluntary basis for Arabs in Judea and Samaria, Palestinians, quote unquote. Why? Well, it actually turns out that a lot of them, precisely as we see with people in Gaza, actually aren't happy there, want to leave. And before you say, well, isn't that Israel's fault for giving them a bad life? No. So much of the Palestinian, quote unquote, keep saying quote unquote because I believe it is a cynical term. So much of their life and the challenges they face, whether it's war, economic challenges, etc., is because of their own decisions. It is self-inflicted. Simple example, when they want to go into Israel to work, by the way, Israel gives them work permits to work inside of Israel, which is another, big security question mark. They have to go through security checkpoints and be searched and blah, blah, blah. Well, why do you think that is? Do you think if they always chose peace with Israel and were, didn't seek to destroy the Jews and throw them into the sea and stop them from having their own state alongside theirs, that Israel would see the need to do this? Oh, they've got these big bought security walls, security fences. It's so unfair, so humiliating. Why do you think that is? Do you think Israel just chooses to be mean and oppressive? Why doesn't Israel do that to Israeli Arabs? They've got it so backwards. So backwards. Now, in other news, they have something called the Israel Prize in Israel, which is one of the highest civilian honors. And as a breaking of convention, where it's normally given to an Israeli, they decided to give it to Donald Trump for all his contributions to Israel, where it's hard to deny, in fact, it's impossible to deny that he has been the most an unprecedented friend to Israel in terms of what he's done as president for Israel.
Doug, you're talking to President Trump. Could you tell him? Yes. I think you're going to tell him.
What?
Yes, dear President Donald Trump,
I can't explain
it's my great and distinct honor to inform you that the Israeli Prize Committee, following Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's recommendation, has reached a historic decision to award you the Israel Prize in the category Special Contribution to the Jewish People. This marks the first time since the establishment of the State of Israel that the Israel Prize is awarded to a non-Israeli citizen.
So there you go, is awarded the Israel Prize, a big moment. Again, from the other side, to see the level of friendship that you have here. You may have heard, we've covered this, that Israel's recognised Somaliland, and this caused a huge controversy from Arab and Islamic countries saying this is unacceptable because, of course, Israel having an ally right next to Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and important shipping trading routes. That, of course, has riled them up, caused them concern in terms of power dynamics. But America's ambassador to the United Nations had this to say. Have a watch.
Israel has the same right to conduct diplomatic relations as any other sovereign state. Earlier this year, several countries, including members of this council, made the unilateral decision to recognize a non-existent Palestinian state. And yet, no emergency meeting was called to express this council's outrage. This council's persistent double standards and misdirection of focus distract from its mission of maintaining international peace and security. On the matter of...
Indeed. Well, that, again, showing serious levels of friendship and synergy. Israel has the same right to conduct diplomatic relations as any other state, and several countries, including members of this council, made a unilateral decision to recognize a non-existent Palestinian state, and yet no emergency meeting was called to express the council's outrage. Indeed. Now, we've seen this clip earlier that Trump was saying that other Arab countries would be involved in Hamas destruction if they don't disarm. And there's been some speculation about whether Saudi Arabia would be involved in that. I mean, if that were the case, that would be unprecedented. And again, the notion that everyone in the administration doesn't like Netanyahu and all of that. Here's the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Got to say, I really don't see much affection at all there on Hegseth or Netanyahu's face. Now, Dinesh D'Souza also commented that Trump has given the middle finger to fake MAGA, which is distinguished by its cowardice. They simply lack the guts to directly attack Trump on this. They fear he will annihilate them, so they'll lick their wounds and then snap at safer targets like Ben Shapiro and James Lindsay. Indeed. Now, what about the Abraham Accords, lastly, and Saudi Arabia's involvement in that? They, of course, have said that, being involved in the Abraham Accords is contingent on a Palestinian state, which, of course, Israel must continue to insist can never happen because it would be signing their own death warrant, God forbid. But have a watch of what Trump had to say about this.
Well, the Abraham Accords are great. It was a great achievement of Jared and everybody. I mean, it was one of the great achievements. They'll be expanded. Countries are already talking about expanding it, and they'll be expanded fairly quickly. Yeah, please.
Is it still on the table, the normalization?
Saudi Arabia is great. We have a great leader, and a friend of mine and a friend of a lot of people. Also an enemy of some people, but those people aren't doing so well. No, Saudi Arabia has been very good as far as I'm concerned. They've done everything that we can ask for.
But normalization with Israel is on the
They're
table?
getting along great with Israel. They will. And at some point, they'll sign the Abraham Accords.
There you go. Now, what I have to say about Trump and all of this is really important. So, Trump, in my mind, can have the potential to not just achieve what he's achieved to date, but utterly transform the world as a president who is utilizing to the very best his global influence, because America, of course, is the greatest superpower in the world today. Now, what he chooses to do is really going to determine how he goes down in history. I did an interview with Rabbi Mendel Kessin, who spoke about Trump's role, potentially divine role, in aiding the world to its messianic destiny from a Jewish perspective. He said that the danger with the path Trump may go down is he may try to force things quickly, force peace in a way that isn't actually peace. Like the 12-day war, saying, no, that's enough. Okay, Israel, stop. You got your nukes sorted. Now that's it. But there are all these ballistic missiles, which now are becoming a problem, and Israel's going to have to deal with again. Like with the Gaza plan, saying, well, we've sorted that, but Hamas are rearming, and you're going to have other Arab and Islamic countries getting involved. So he has a bit of a desire, an inclination to want to get things happening quickly, even if it's a shallow peace, even if it's not real, because maybe he wants that recognition, he wants that whatever. And so the question is he going to be able to do what size may be a bit more unpopular and tougher decisions that may be a bit more challenging and harder, but in the end will be the right move? That is the real big question here. And for those who are sort of sensing, oh, maybe we're starting to see a drift here, certainly because of his warming up to Qatar and others, my sense is he's probably just sort of trying to play a clever game. And I think his heart still very much is for the Jewish people and Israel. But whether he chooses to do what's actually right and may sometimes be a bit more difficult and unpopular, rather than force something that may look good at a shallow level but will just end up dissolving and destroying itself, that is yet to be seen. But ultimately, in the end, there shouldn't need to be a contradiction in his mind. If he really is after recognition and having these great achievements, he needs to understand that they might not always come with immediate recognition or popularity, but in the end, their effects could be cosmic. Before you go, you have to check out the trailer for our new documentary on Moshiach, the Jewish belief about the Messiah, what he will do, how the world will look after his coming, and why his arrival is close. And if you want to watch the full thing, just click the link below in the video description. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have carried a promise that history is not a random cycle, that suffering and darkness and exile are not the end of the story, that one day the world will be redeemed and the Messiah, the Moshiach in Hebrew, will come. But what does that actually mean? Who is Moshiach? When will he come? How will we know he's real? Why would God design a world that waits so long for redemption in the first place? And what will life feel like after he comes? With AI and machines beginning to replace work, maybe we're already catching a glimpse. But then what will we do with our days? The prophets spoke of that world long ago. In this groundbreaking JTV Plus documentary, we uncover the truth about the Jewish vision of the Messiah, who he is, why it matters, and why his coming could be closer than you think. Join us as we reveal the truth about history's most anticipated figure. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.